when is the last time? I know it's different right now with Zoom stuff and everything, and it's been a while since people have been on stage. When's the last time that you've bombed on stage where you go, oh geez, like sometimes you bomb and you're like, oh whatever, it's a weird crowd, and there's sometimes you bomb and you're like, I'm gonna have to really take a hard look at myself.
Yeah.
Do you have when's the most recent bomb for you?
Well, I think taking a hard look at myself just happens after every show, but
Yeah.
regardless. But yeah, it's got to be new material, which I love doing because it's so scary and so new. It feels like your first time. But yeah, the last non-Zoom bomb that I had would probably be it was 2 years ago, and I was working on a cruise ship, and which is already like you gotta take my wife please and do
Right.
that. And I was saying, like, I was frustrated because I didn't want to be like nothing wrong with having work, but I didn't want to be a cruise ship comic, and I was just taking it for the paycheck. But I'd taken a few of them in a row, and I felt like I wasn't getting anything out of them. You're just up there trying to be a clown, and so I decided instead I was going to do the material I wanted to do instead of what I thought would please a bunch of retirees. And man, it was ugly. And like it was so bad that I had that internal thing constantly of like, flip, go to the script, go to the good stuff, and then like, no, you're gonna go to bed tonight knowing you grew as a comic and all. And a cruise ship in front of 70-year-olds is not the place to grow as a comic. And I
Right.
learned my lesson, but it was bad. And then for the rest of the week, anyone will tell you who does a cruise ship that the problem is then you live with those people for the rest of the week. And my show was like the second night out of 7. So they're just, people would see you like in the food and they're like, that's the guy, don't make eye contact. You're like a leper
Right.
for the next 5 days. So yeah, that was the most recent one I remember.
It's funny because that is such a comics mentality of going up there and being like, you know what, I'm funny enough that I can get these people to, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And that feeling of like where it's not working and you're like, oh God, what have I done? And then you have to flip the script and that it's too far gone. And you're just like, Jesus, this is all my fault.
It's so true. And at the time I was watching like Bill Burr and these guys that were just like, and I was admiring so much, like, they're not asking the audience like, am I funny? They're telling the audience I'm funny. And I was in that kind of zone. Meanwhile,
Right.
he's doing theaters, and I'm on a cruise ship, trying to be Bill Burr up there.
Right. Yeah.
If you know my material, I mean, it's all like, it's about laundry anyway, but I just half-baked laundry jokes, and I think I'm Bill Burr.
Right. It's so funny. I think that's the worst thing for comics to do is like right before a show or sort of you start watching like killers, like
Yeah.
Burr. Like I remember like going to a show and I had just watched a documentary about Bill Hicks, and it was maybe one of the worst shows of my life because I go up there and like, I got something to say. Like, I'm going to go up there and make some points. And, it's a fire hall in Western Pennsylvania.
So
I'm
true.
doing 20 minutes. And I'm like, you people need to wake up. And they're like eating stuffed chicken breasts. They're like, what?
That's amazing.
We love to set ourselves up for failure.
It's so true, though. It's so true,
So when you're in that situation, when you're on the cruise ship, because like you said, you do now live with these people. That's a good thing to do night 7. It's like, that's a good thing to do as they're getting off. What is it? How do you cope with that when you're on the boat and everybody's walking around and they know it's you and it's them? How do you handle that?
Well, it's a weird feeling because, to your point, you want to go the last night because even if you kill, you still don't want to deal with that during the week because now you're locked in and you can't even eat a meal because everyone keeps coming over and they
Right.
tell you jokes. Hey, comedian, I got one for you. So it's almost a double-edged sword. But yeah, it's an awkward, uncomfortable week. It's when you don't do well early. Thankfully, it didn't happen often.
Right.
But yeah, you're just like, you're on a ship and you have bad internet and you're waiting to get to land, and so you can just run away from everybody. It's not a comfortable feeling by any means. And then on top of that, you're worried about like your bosses. Like you got hired, you got an agent who gets a report. I mean, it's like doing a college. You get there's,
Right.
there's you bomb at a club, all your buddies laugh, and the manager doesn't care, and But yeah, if you bomb on a cruise ship, that's a corporation, and then there's cruisecritic.com and all these things. You're like, oh man, this is serious. So I bailed on the new edgy stuff.
There's like a great and I think the legend of it is actually probably better than the story itself, where you always have heard the story, I think, of, have you ever heard the comic that got airlifted off the cruise ship because the audience hated them? And I think the comic has changed every time I've heard somebody else tell me the story. They're like, it's this person, it's that person, they actually sent a naval boat in to get them off, and like, but that's what you think about. You're like, they're gonna have to sink the ship for me to get out of this. Like,
right.
It's the only thing that's gonna save it now.
And if you're really offensive too, I mean, you have angry customers who want them off the ship, and that is a
right.
quandary. Yeah, like, because I know of stories of comics who next port they've been asked to, like, you're done. So
right.
yeah, because it's just their person, this is their life. The 50-year anniversary, they saved all this money, and that person is making me angry. I want them off. Which, in fairness, like we all say, we're comics, we get to do what we want, but that's their turf. That's the corporation hired. It's like doing a corporate. You got to play by their rules.
What's your thought on that? You bring up a good point. It's sort of, we're comics, we do what we want. I feel like I'm split sometimes. There's sometimes where I go, you know what? I'm going to go out on my terms. I'm going to do my thing. And there's other times where I go, well, you did pay me to make you laugh. Yes. And sometimes you have to play to the audience that you're given. What are your thoughts on that?
I always skew the latter. I just feel I've been, I'm an Irish Catholic, 8 years of Catholic school, guilt, all that. And I just feel like that someone hired you. It's your job to figure out how to make them laugh. And I completely admire comics who go, no, I'm here to. I remember Daniel Tosh once, when he was doing well, told me he got hired to do this corporate when he was just starting to do well. And he was getting like 20, 25 grand. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Because I knew, like, his style is, I used to open for him. So I was like, he's like, I'm going to do what I do. And I was like, really? You don't feel any obligation to go in and try to, like, he's like, no, I'm not going to juggle, I'm going to do what I do. They hired me. But yeah, in general, to answer your question, I do. I feel like we have an obligation to fit in with the room. And I've gotten a lot of work that way. I get corporates, I get, more TV stuff, I think, because of it. He's a nice, friendly guy. He's going to please them. That said, what's that old thing? They said they either you follow the audience or the audience follows you, Right. And I'm right now in my career still following the audience. No one's buying tickets to see me. They're just coming to the show on a cruise ship.
Yeah. But you know what? I think the one thing in your favor is that you will always work.
Yes.
If you are somebody that knows how to be funny consistently in every situation,
yes,
that's always going to be in demand. You take a big risk when you go, I've got a point to make, and I'm going to make it whether they like it or not. But you see that a lot in young comics. Do you see this? Did you start in New York, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, so I started in Pittsburgh and then moved to New York. So I saw this a lot in my hometown. I wonder what it's like for you, where you see young comics do this, where they'll come up and they're so aggressive. They're so aggressive with making their points and getting their opinions across. And they go, well, Attell does it, or Stanhope and this. You go, well, they're also famous.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
That helps. That really helps them, because people pay to see that. What do you see that a lot? And two, what do you think it is?
It feels like things are just different now. Like when I started, it was the 90s, and it was just make people laugh. That was your job. However you could figure out to make them laugh. That was the number one thing. And however again, and the more laughs per minute, the better. That's what I always thought. I would watch Jim Gaffigan. I would do like bringer shows at Gotham, and then Gaffigan would be the pro closer coming in, and it would just be bang, bang, bang. Greg Giraldo, all these guys would just come in and destroy with these. And so I was like, all right, well, as long as they're laughing, I'm good. And I, to the detriment maybe of having a point, like I took a class once, a comedy class when I first started at one of the clubs, and they're like, the teacher's like, you got to have a point. All comedy should have a point. And I remember being like, I don't know if I have a point at all. And to this day, 20 years later, I'm like, I don't think I have a point, but everyone laughed and I got a paycheck, and that was good. I don't know. I don't see a lot of the younger guys, but I think probably social media and everyone's voice counts and everyone has something to say. That whole thing, probably it's not a world that I incorporated into my comedy. No one wants to hear what I think. Right. They want to hear about men and women are different, at least from me.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. When you're in like, Omaha and you're giving your opinions on social issues, people tend to be, we get enough of this. We get enough of this.
Well, that's the other thing I always say all day. I'm not good at it. I'm glad I'm not good at political comedy or social comments. I'm glad, because there's all day long, and I couldn't do that if I wanted to. I tried to be an angry comic one night because my buddy's like, "You're really funny when you're angry. Like when you're really going, you should try it." And the audience was like, "Jesus, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, this guy's got an issue." I'm like, okay, right. I think I'm Guy Smiley. I think this is my cheery disposition. And to your point, I did Last Comic Standing. It was a couple years ago. Mark Norman was on that episode or that season. And I remember after my first audition in LA, Russell Peters said to me, he goes, "You will always work." And it was like the nicest thing, and then also like the biggest insult ever. Because I didn't pass. I didn't make it past the first round. And I was like, I thought that was a nice thing to say. And in retrospect, I think he was being nicely telling me I'm nothing. Yeah,
right. It's like the old adage of like, you got a face for radio kind of thing. It's like,
exactly.
Okay, thanks. Oh God. When you first started, what was it like, in New York? It's a lot of bringer shows, I can imagine, when you're first coming up. What is sort of the bringer show that you think back on and you go, "Oh man, I'm sorry they saw that"? Or is it most of them? Because, I guess for me, if it contests and stuff, you bring your family, you bomb, you go, okay, that was bad.
Well, I was really lucky because I got a job at an ad agency right out of school in New York. And so everyone was these young 20-somethings who were new to New York City and all wanted to go out at night. So all I had to do a bringer show was send out a blast in the company. And inevitably, I had 15 to 25 like people who wanted to come drink, which was amazing. Again, It didn't matter what you said, it didn't matter what you did. But the one story I remember that drives me nuts is it was New York Comedy Club back in the day. And I was doing shows there, and they loved me because I would sometimes I'd literally have like 40, 45 people from the company come, and I was killing it. And they would still just give me my 6 minutes and whatever. But one night, raining, cold, whatever, no one showed up. Like 2 people, 1 person or something from the company. No other friends came to this bringer, and they wouldn't let me on stage because I didn't have my minimum 6. And I was like, you got to kid me. I brought 55 people last week. It's per show. It's for this and that. And I'll never forget that. It's being like, this business, man, what have you done for me lately? So I can't say that I bombed because I didn't even get to go up, which was an embarrassment of its own. All the 2 people from work have been like, "We heard you were amazing. You're not even allowed on stage."
Oh my God. It is such a cruel mistress where you do think you're like, they love me. I can't do any wrong. I'm here. I'm bringing all these people in. And next week you go, "Who are you?" You know what? You never figure it out, know?
No.
It's nuts. What do you think when you first started? What's the most work you put in for the least amount of money, if that makes sense? You know what I'm saying? Like whether it be miles driven or stress leading up to the show, whatever it is. And then you go, I got nothing. I got a bar chip. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that would be actually, that is a bar story.
Right.
When I first started, I got hired a gig in the middle of Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere, 6-hour drive. And I borrowed my parents' car, didn't have a car. was getting $50 cash to drive 6 hours and do a show, no room, no nothing, and drive back. But I wanted stage time desperately, and I said yes to everything. I was fortunate that my parents lived in Jersey. I was able to steal a car at night when I needed something. And yeah, man, I was, you're in that zone early on, especially where you're like, this is different. This is new. All right, this is I'm getting booked. This is, and I drove 6 hours, pulled into the parking lot, parked next to a bumper sticker, a truck with a bumper sticker that said, "Keep honking, I'm reloading." And it was just all pickup trucks, and went inside, and it was just the nightmare gig. No stage, stood on the bar. They never turned off the TVs or closed the pool table. It was just this madman standing on a bar. They didn't, if I remember correctly, they didn't even really announce the show. They kind of like, the bartender was just like, okay, now comedy. And they so half the audience, it wasn't even an audience. It was just a bar where they tried to put somebody up it was like a lunatic. I'm standing on the bar. People were doing shots at my feet. It was, and I remember thinking, though, I remember driving home, and I will say this, I remember thinking that those minutes are going to, every minute I stand on stage or on a bar in this case is going to be 1 minute that I'm better. And I, it's the one way I justified it. I'm like, that was a nightmare. I never want to go back or do anything like that again, but I probably learned and grew. Whereas if I was killing in a great room, I probably wouldn't have grown much.
That is great foresight to have as a young comic, because it's not easy to see that sometimes. You have to be delusional enough to want to do it again, but it also hurts. Like, I know many times driving home hours and hours and just thinking, like, through the night, you go, why would I do this to myself again? But to know that you're getting something out of it is that sort of how you look at comedy? You try to keep that mentality.
Yeah. I'm a very numbers oriented guy. I'm very almost corporate or school minded. Like, you work hard in school so you get good grades, and then you get a good job. And that was my whole wiring. I came from a family. My dad was a businessman. So when I got into comedy, it was very difficult for me to understand the chaos and there was no structure. There was no promotions per se. There was no, so I needed something to ground me, and I started counting shows. I was like, all right, well, let me do 100 shows, because at least that's something I can own and take control of, because it's just such a random thing. And a show could be a 3-minute open mic. A show could be whatever it was. I counted it, and it helped me calm myself and okay, now I have control over something here. I did 100 shows. And then once I got to that point, I realized a lot of the concerns, questions, or the things I wasn't good at, all of a sudden I look back, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I worried about that. I wasn't, all the questions a young comic has. I'm better now. I get that now. I see it. And so that to me became, I count shows every year, and I still do, because I knew that I would be better simply. Because if you ever ask a veteran comic, it's, perform. How do I get that? Perform. No, but give me the perform. Write and perform. Right. Write and perform. That's it. Any veteran comic will tell you, write and perform. But I can't, I was wondering if write and perform, and figure out how to do that.
Yeah, everybody's looking for the one person to go, actually, there's a third option.
Exactly.
And we haven't been telling people. Yeah, we keep it to ourselves. But you asked, you caught me on the right day, and you were so nice about it. And I know it's always like in a green room in a club that you're not. And I know we've only known each other for maybe 45 minutes, but let me tell you the secret to success.
Let me give you well, my favorite one was when I first got Letterman. Every comic who you've ever met, not every comic, the cool ones know, like, good for you, dude, awesome. But how many comics, and to your point, comics you don't even know, you're on the road. Hey man, how'd you get Letterman? Tell me how to get Letterman. And I started to resent it, because comics who didn't even know me or whatever, just like to tell. So I used to tell the full story, quote unquote. I was on Letterman first 2012. And I was like, well, back in 1998, I went to an open mic, and it was a good open mic. We had a good crowd and this and that. And I met this guy. We kind of kept it to, and after 30 seconds of this, back then in 2002, the comic's eyes start to gloss over. Go, what are you talking? Like, how'd you get Letterman? That's how you were just on the, how'd you get it? I'm like, I'm telling you the story. And it was true. It was, here's what I did. Here's how I worked. Here's who I networked with, who I met. Here's the sacrifices I've made over the last 15 years. Right. And they didn't want that. No. What's the number? What's the phone number?
Right. They're looking for where to send the tape immediately.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's nuts. It's to a much lesser degree. A few years ago, I auditioned for JFL, and when I was still living in Pittsburgh, and I remember asking someone if I could do. I said, "Hey, could I drop in and do like 5 minutes on your show? Because I'm doing a JFL audition in a couple weeks." And they go, "Well, how did you get that?" And I was like, "Well, I honestly, at the time I was like, I don't really know. I don't know. They asked."
Yeah.
And they go, and then they have the nerve to go, "Would you mind bringing my name up when you go?"
Oh,
I said, "Are you
God.
out of your?" Listen, I mean, I'm so on the outside of the universe that they live in.
Exactly.
To bring myself is a big thing. And now you want me to bring you, like, just in conversation. They're like, "Hey, I know I'm trying to be here to change my life, but if you ever need someone else, there's a guy in Pittsburgh who would really love to do this." It's nuts.
In fact, before I even perform, I want to tell you about my friend. Well, that brings up a great point of like being oblivious, which I would argue that is, versus like being pushy in the business, which is something I've never been. The guy who was the squeaky wheel gets the glue and all that stuff. I mean, that's something I always sort of like annoyed me, but secretly maybe admired about comedians, like comics who are just pushing, going, climbing, like, dude, have some tact, have a little,
Right, because you see some comics where the way they talk on social media or whatever it is, and you go, what is going on here? Like you're acting like you're at the Apollo, and like you're like, oh my God, I got big announcements. I love when comics big announcement. I'm like,
my favorite.
What? What is tell us now. There's 14 people like this. It's like, what are you keeping them in suspense for?
Exactly.
But if you're not gonna hype yourself up, who will? I guess
that's
the other side.
Something to be said for it. Absolutely.
What you're talking about the to go back to the show in the bar, right? So I almost don't want to venture into it because I feel like I can relate to it too much. But I want to go for people that understand the situation. You're a new comic. Your idea is probably like, whatever you do, don't make anybody mad. Don't upset the booker. Don't upset, right? You're like, I hope someone calls me back, and it's a horrible job. You don't want it to, really, you don't want to go back, but you're like, I got to kill. And this, so what goes through your head when you go in there? You realize there's no stage, there's no lights. You're standing on a bar. What sort of goes through the young Michael Somerville's head?
Well, that's the funny thing, like you say, the young, the new comic thing, because now we would be wired differently. But then I think sheer terror.
Right.
Like, this is not, I don't know how to, the only way I know how to do well is if I go to a room that has a stage and a microphone and a nice audience. That's all I know how to do at this point. And I only have X amount of material. So I had never, up until that point, truly failed. I'd had good shows, bad shows, only 10 people at Stand Up New York or something, but I'd never just utterly, and again, the circumstances being completely wrong for comedy. I just remember being like terrified and then having a tiny little glimmer of flash of confidence. Like, here we go, Chris Rock, bring the pain. Let's do and then getting up and quickly learning that you simply didn't have the tools to be successful. I can't say that. I'm sure there are comics who could have figured something out in that room and made it a better show. I was not one of them, certainly at the time. And the worst part is I did 2 jokes. I think, half the people didn't know I was up there. So they're looking like, why is this guy, what's he doing? Like, is he the owner's son? Like, what is, who's screaming up there? And I didn't do well. So I tried to do crowd work with the people playing pool who just weren't looking, weren't watching. They weren't, I'm like, hey, 8-ball corner, some crazy, and they're just like, what is this guy doing? Just good. It was a disaster. It was a true disaster. And I learned to look for the one person who's listening. I don't think there was one, but they like, don't focus on that. Focus on someone who's enjoying you. I don't think anyone was enjoying me.
And it's so funny because if that was normal job, let's, if you were an accountant and you had that kind of day at work, you would go, well, I'm obviously quitting. I can't do your taxes if I am not allowed to use a calculator and a computer, and there's people drinking and they're hostile. You would quit your job. You would go, this is not good conditions. But
100%.
as a comic, you go, I guess this is just, it's $50, right? It's
a tough gig on a Wednesday, but hey, it's work.
Right. You talked a little bit about this at the beginning, and you just sort of brought up, about not having enough time. And that is such a relatable thing, I think, to all comics, where someone goes, how much time can you do? And you go, I'll do 30, and you have 5. And you find out that you have 5. And after, you were mentioning a little bit about having a good 10 and that getting you into some hot water.
Man, when I first started and I quit my job, I said, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian, because I was working during the day at this ad agency and then doing, like they said, the bringers at night, but I felt like a rock star because everyone would come. And then I said, I'm ready to quit this job and dive full in. And everyone said, you just need a good tape. That's your big thing. Get a good 10-minute tape. And so I worked on that up until the point that I quit the job. I said, all I need is a 10-minute tape, and then I'm golden. And I had good material early on. I was, creative originals, kid out of college in the big city. I could see my sitcom in my head. And I had a great 10-minute tape, sent it out to everyone. And I booked this college booker, booked me for the summer of all these campuses through like Penn State satellite campuses all throughout Pennsylvania. And it was like, I had to be 15, 20 schools, and they were doing like summer school classes and all this crazy. A lot of them were commuter campuses. And so I get the first contract and I'm psyched. I'm like, this is easy. Entertainment's easy.
And before we get into how this might turn, so some people don't know, that is a lot of money, probably.
Yeah, that was $1,000 each.
Right. So that is probably more money you've ever seen as a comic, and you're probably at that time going, my life is about to change. This is why I did this.
Well, I thought I was the prodigy. Like I was,
right.
Chappelle, the guys who just get scooped up, and this guy clearly he's a rocket ship, and here he goes.
Right.
And absolutely. No, and $1,000, which was absolutely insane. I think the most I'd ever made up until that point was $15 when I won a contest at Don't Tell Mamas on 46th Street, the funniest comic contest or something. I got $15, which I still have framed in my childhood bedroom back home where I was living. But so, yeah, I digress. All these shows, I'm all excited. I get the first contract and it says 8 to 9 p.m. And I call the agent. I go, oh, this is awesome. Thank you. Who else is on the show? And he goes, nobody. I go, well, it says 8 to 9 p.m. And I never knew up until that point, like that. He's like, yeah, you're the show. And I lost all the blood from my face. But it had to be about 6 weeks away before this tour started. So I decided, you're going to bear down and you're going to prepare. You're going to be ready to do an hour. And I worked my butt off for 6 weeks. But as you well know, there's only so much you can do. If you're not a seasoned comic, you're not a seasoned comic. I got up at the firhad show, which had maybe 10 kids in some the student center thing. And they didn't look like the nicest kids in the world. And I did a joke. I had started my set, and I had built in, like, I paced myself, and then I'll do this, and I'll do a little crowd work. And I thought I could get a story going. And I just, in my mind, I can do an hour. I can pull this off. Do my first 2 jokes. They bomb. And I do the rookie nerve, speed up to the next joke thing. I go through my whole 10 minutes in like 4.5 minutes. And then I start doing crowd work, which went horribly wrong when I go, so, hey, what are you studying? And the kid just goes, you just asked me that like 2 minutes ago. And I was already like repeating. I was so nervous. I just didn't even know who I had talked to already and everything. And then about 20, 25 minutes in, kids started to leave, which was the worst part because there's only 10 or 15 of them there. And, and they were doing that, like that almost nice, gentle, like, so sorry, leave, let's just, you think he's looking right now? I'd almost rather them just leave, but it was absolutely brutal. But I will say this, I had all those shows that summer, and I got really good at crowd work by the end. And I grew. I mean, again, I failed. I don't think this guy, I don't think the agent got good feedback ever. But my big move was in the contract. It always said that he owed me a meal after, like the student government will take you out to Applebee's or whatever the heck it was. It was part of the contract, And so I'll never forget, I performed my butt off at those Applebee's for the student government because I figured those are the important people who are going to report back. And I got a kill at this Applebee's because the show was bad. And I was an affable, friendly guy in person at dinner. And no joke, one of the reports actually said, off stage, he's wonderful. Really pleasant. So yeah, that was a brutal summer.
Oh my God. The idea of having to stretch once, is scary, but for an entire summer is really a task, a tall task. And you did all the shows.
Had a couple great audiences. I will say college kids who were like some, some schools are just nice kids. And so you could do a little crowd work. You could do a little interaction. But if there was a show that they weren't there for you, man, it was not pretty at all. And my worst mistake I ever made, you ever try to repeat something? So like one night I was doing this funny thing with these couple of girls, college girls. And I made this funny joke about like, well, I'm staying at the Ramada, and it was light and tight. It wasn't as creepy as I just made it sound.
Right.
But it killed. It was like a funny, the comic just. And the next night I had a different show, a different campus, and I was not doing well. And I tried to recreate that moment. I just started like inappropriately talking to girls who weren't really into the show. I'm like, so are you guys dating? Are you? And they're like, this guy. And then I was like, I'm staying at the, I got such a big laugh night, a big laugh the night before. Oh, it's brutal.
That's always horrible when you want to be like, hey, I'm not crazy. This killed at St. John's the other day. So, oh my God.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't good.
And you're also, it's really something because you have to now, it's so many levels of hard things. You have to stretch. Yeah. You are on the road probably for the first time for a long period of time, right? You're adjusting to that. And then it's also college shows, even in great situations, are not perfect. No. They're really hard where it's like you said, sometimes it's in a room where there's 10 kids. Sometimes it's in a cafeteria at noon, it's like, so you're battling all these things. It's such a young comedy age, it's crazy.
It's so true. And it reminds me, I was doing a satellite campus, commuter campus in Pennsylvania. And one of those gigs was 12-1 and in the lunchroom. And no stage. My job was to stand on a lunch table. And I get there and I'm already in my mind. By that point, I'm already in my mind, like, as long as I get to 50, if these shows start 5 to 10 minutes late, my only job is to get to that next hour. So if I start at 12:10, I just need to get to like 12:58. And that's, it's an hour, even though it's only 40, 45 or whatever. And so this particular campus, it was finals week. And everyone was commuting and studying. It was finals. They're sitting there studying, and they thought it would be a surprise to have a comedian, the unannounced comedian, come in during finals week and stand on a table for an hour and tell jokes. And the woman who ran it was a faculty member, not a kid, ran it. And I already looked, and by then I was getting good at being like, you know what? Did you not announce this? Like, they don't know I'm here? Like, no, it's finals week. We think it'll be a nice stress relief for you to get up and just, be funny for an hour. I'm like, but they're all studying. I don't think they're going to want, they got to, nope. And I go, well, why don't I keep it tight? And this woman, I'll never forget, like a librarian. So she goes, your contract says 12-1. And she had a stopwatch. And she said, I'll be back here. And she kept track with a stopwatch in the back of the room. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be hard. Those kids hated me. I mean, they were literally like looking up, like, would you please shut the, I got a test in 12 minutes here. Right. And she sat back there with a stopwatch and timed me. I did a full hour. I absolutely bombed and I got paid.
Oh God, that is such a classic move where you go, well, hey, less is more. You're looking around and you're like, all right, well, I'll convince these people I'll do 45 or 30, whatever it is. And,
right.
And usually they're pretty like, all right, hey, we're just here to, they don't even know. They don't even keep track of the time.
That's the thing. They don't know. Yeah.
They have such a stickler. That is hard.
Yeah.
That is.
But it's
also, what is,
go ahead.
Go ahead,
I was
Mike.
just going to say, have you ever had to, I know the thing that scares me the most to this day is not knowing how long you're doing. It's one thing to say you got to do this, but that get up and stretch because the headliner's not here or whatever. Have you ever had that? Because that's, to me, the scariest.
Yes. I have worked at some clubs where the headliner just likes to come late. and they go, we'll give you a light when he shows up.
Oh.
And it's like, well, you're in the business of comedy. You know that there's an order to these things. Like I can't like get a 1 minute light and be, have already done my closer or whatever it is. It's like, it's frightening. It really is.
Yeah.
I know what I want to ask you. The idea though, that you're supposed to go up while they're studying is so funny, because that is a common thing where people go, well, just go up there and do it. People will like it. Where they think surprise comedy is acceptable.
And it's going to work. What? And it's, yeah.
What is that? What is that about comedy that makes people think, yeah, we could just do this wherever, whenever?
It's people who aren't in the business, right? I mean, they do, like, was it Todd Glass who said it was like simple things, like 5 or 6 simple things that make a show work. And, the more of those you have, the more success you'll have, but you certainly have to have a willing audience. I mean,
right. Yeah.
You can't just stop someone on the street and start doing a bit. I don't know, but I think it's people who aren't in the business. My hardest shows, my least well put together shows, the layouts were the worst, all that were people who were, it was a fundraiser for a church, it was a charity for the people who don't do comedy. And then the worst thing about those are the when they don't listen to you. You try to say, like, listen, these are the things that help. No, we're going to have you, you're going to go up, then we're going to do, I did one in Bayonne, New Jersey, where they had a woman's, the chef from last year's gig died. And so they had his wife and they did a thing for him, a whole screen show before the comedy show. Like, well, we just want to remember, blah, blah, blah. And now come. And I kept trying to tell them, like, this, can you do that after? Can you do? Then they did a halftime. So they did the eulogy. They brought up the first comic. Thankfully, I was not on first. And then they did a halftime and for like a half hour. And people were just slaughtered. I mean, it was like midnight. There was an open bar. And they're like, and now back to comedy. So no one sat back down. But I'm begging the people before the gig. I'm telling you, we do this for a living. I'm telling you, we know what we're doing. We know our crowd. We know what. I'm like, all right. So. But yeah, you learn to say, all right, I got paid.
Yeah, exactly. You go, well, it was a bag of money. I had to go get it. And
right?
It's done.
It wasn't a bag. It was like a Ziploc maybe. Or
a white envelope, with your name spelled wrong. You're like, good Lord. Yeah. You've disrespected me at every level. It's so sad. I did a contest once where the host goes up and he goes, before we start the contest, we have a special audience in the crowd. Last month, one of the comics used to come to the open mic here was shot and killed, and we have his sister and his mother in the front row.
In the front row.
He goes, so we'd like to take a moment of silence and pay tribute to him right now for them. And they do like a full minute. And then he goes, who's ready to get this show started?
Are you ready to laugh?
They're in tears. And the first comic, luckily I was the first comic, but he has to go on stage. He's fighting for a spot in this contest. And he goes, all right, my name's weird. It's this weird spelling of, It's
I know what
horrible.
You're thinking.
Right? Yeah. Oh my God.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. Let me ask you this to wrap up here. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What is the, I like to ask this for the comics. What is the coping mechanism for you after a bad show? Do you have not necessarily a vice, but a ritual or something that you always do where you go, I know that is the thing that sort of picks me up or what, Yeah,
that is a great question. My healthiest one would be to sit down with my notes and work. I know I always do my best writing when I first get off stage. You got that, you're narrow, you're laser minded, and good or bad shows. I've always loved doing that and say, okay, that was, what didn't work and why, or what did work and why. I just felt like I was doing something to move myself forward. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say that is, but otherwise I don't have a consistent, I don't know, habit or whatever you would call it. Obviously it's easy to get some cocktails and say, oh, well, and try to be funny with your friends and
Right.
remind yourself. But I don't know. What is your answer to that question?
It sort of changes. For a while it was fast food. Like if I was on the road and I had a bad show, it was immediately finding like the Taco Bell or the McDonald's, and it was like, I'll take this back to the hotel.
Yeah.
And this will be that. And I would say a notorious to call other comics. Like, I think there's 4 comics that I will call almost after every show, but specifically bad shows. Okay. And I will call them in an order, and I just sort of repeat that order until one of them picks up. And, they answer and I'm halfway through the conversation. I'm like, and the lights aren't even on. And it's like, so the show was not great, huh? But to me, you talking to another comic, at least they can validate that you're not totally insane.
Totally. And I love that you have the 4 comics listed. So like as time goes on and they see a call from you at a certain hour, they know like, right. I don't know if I have it in me.
Right. Oh, I know for sure. I've had that, and I've had it on the other side where I have comics that will call me after shows, and they're calling. If I get a call at 12:30, I'm like, wow, this is. I got to clear the schedule because it's going to be a big one. Because really, you call if it's that good, you're not calling right away. If the show's from 8 to 9 and you're getting a call at 9:10, you're
exactly.
Like, oh shit,
No, if you did well, you're posting on Facebook. That's
right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for doing this. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Please, of course. Please tell people where to find you, where to hear you.
Oh man, I'm never good at this stuff. I have like the Twitter at Somerville Puns, and Instagram is Michael Somerville, just at Michael Somerville. Yeah, just all that social media. And I'm sure everyone's friends with everyone, so you could find me that way. Yeah,
and you got a bunch of great albums out too.
Oh yeah.
2019
Spotify
was your last album, right?
iTunes. I put out in 2020. I put out a best of Michael Somerville. But yeah, iTunes and Spotify, all that. Please follow, because even if you don't listen to them, just follow me because it looks good.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, thanks again, Mike. I really appreciate this, man.
Thanks for having me.